Hi everybody, my name is Brady and I'm a 19th century American historian, and we are back with another React video, and today we're going to be doing more Hamilton. I'm caving in and giving you one of the songs you really asked for, non-stop. So we're bridging the first and second acts. The war is over. We're getting into this new country that is really poorly defined. They need to build a new government. It's very exciting. This is some of my favorite stuff to study. When we have the country kind of formed, it still is building upon an incomplete system for years and years and years, but these are very important years. We got the Federalist Papers. Hamilton is obviously going to be huge in that. I guess we can talk about all that stuff during the video. So let's get the song started. I'm going to be pausing a whole lot, doing some breakdown, give you context for some of the historical events that they are talking about here. And if this is your first time, it's good to have you. Let's do this.
After the war, I went back to New York. After the war, I went back to New York. I finished up my studies and I practiced law. Burr worked next door.
So when these guys get swept up in the revolution, they don't end up establishing their law practices that they were aiming for beforehand. So a lot of people end up getting swept off into the revolution, and then they come back, and now it's time to reestablish ourselves. These guys have to go back, finish their law degrees. They're going to work at the same time in the Schuyler Law Library, which I have mentioned in previous videos, so they're going to probably interact a decent amount during those times, unless they really kept to themselves, but I'd imagine they would become a little bit more acquainted during those times, if they weren't already deeply acquainted beforehand. But I'd imagine that's where they're going to start connecting more on a legal level, so that's fun.
Even though we started at the very same time, Alexander Hamilton began to climb. How to account for his rise to the top? Man, the man is non-stop. Gentlemen of the jury, I'm curious, bear with me. Are you aware that we're making history? This is the first murder trial of our brand new nation, the liberty behind the liberation.
I really love that they're going into the Levi Weeks trial. However, there's a huge problem with that. It hasn't happened yet. And it's not going to happen until we get pretty close to the end of where this musical takes place. Like, this occurs not long before the election of 1800. These two are still working together on a legal case, and it's a big one. He says it's the first murder trial of the brand new nation. That's not true, because obviously this takes place much later, but there is something to that. It is the first scandalous murder trial that really swept people up in it. Think of it as like, it's a bad comparison, but it's like the OJ trial of the time. Everybody around really got into it. The whole city's just looking at it like, oh, I wonder what's happening. Everybody's paying attention. It is better recorded than trials were prior to this. This is the first one where we have like such a deep record of it. So it's actually a very interesting story. There's a book called, I think it's called Duel with the Devil, and I thought it was a book about Hamilton and Burr more, but really it just paints the picture of New York during this time. We have Burr establishing his water company, and his water company is totally tied up in this because the girl who's murdered in this case is murdered in one of his wells. So realistically, Burr should not have had anything to do with this trial, but it doesn't seem that anybody really questioned it. Well, if Burr were around today and his property were mixed up in this legal case, he wouldn't be able to represent the person involved. That just likely wouldn't happen.
I intend to prove beyond the shadow of a doubt with my assistant counsel. Counsel Hamilton, sit down. A client every week says innocent. Call your first witness. That's all you had to say. Okay. One more thing.
So we're getting into 1800 when that stuff is happening. This is taking place in the context of the musical. This is taking place before the country's all set up. But this is much later on. So these two are still working together on a professional level for a while. And I like how it really distinguishes the two in the way they approach the legal process. Hamilton, he's very wordy. It is said that Hamilton, I guess Burr, how did it go? Burr can say in 1 hour what Hamilton could say in 2. Hamilton just went on, and he also had a problem with badgering witnesses. That was a big problem with him. You want to come join me for the video? Come on, come here. Little punk. Where was I? So, Hamilton was known for badgering witnesses, which, if you know anything about the law, that is, it's generally frowned upon, and it's not going to endear you to any sort of jury. That's one of the big things here. If you go on like Hamilton does, you don't keep their attention, and if you badger the witness, they're just going to feel sympathy for the witness. So, generally, Hamilton was an okay lawyer, but he had his flaws. Burr, he was like this awesome like family lawyer by the end of his life. He was like the expert in family law, which is a whole lot of fun because he ends up helping with Mariah Reynolds, who appears a little later in the musical, helping with her divorce case, which a lot of people will look at that and like, isn't that a coincidence? Not really. Burr is the family law guy. He is the guy you would go to for that sort of case, so that's fun.
Why do you assume you're the smartest in the room? Why do you assume you're the smartest in the room? Why do you assume you're the smartest in the room? So that attitude may be your doom. Why do you write like you're running out of time? Write day and night like you're running out of time. Every day you fight like you're running out of time. Keep on fighting in the meantime. Non-stop. Corruption's such an old song that we can sing along in harmony. And nowhere is it stronger than in Albany.
We have a lot of elected officials and people who are supposed to represent the people will be living these extravagant lives and charging it to the people. It basically feels like embezzling at this point. So like, I get why he would point out that. And of course, we're talking about New York here. It's going to be the financial capital of the nation. Of course, there's going to be a ton of corruption.
These colonies, economies, increasingly stalling, and honestly, that's why public service seems to be calling me. I practiced the law, practically perfected it. I've seen injustice in the world, and I've corrected it.
You know, he says he practiced the law and he perfected it, and I instantly think of all his weaknesses in court, but there's more to it because Hamilton is famous for a concept known as implied powers. He is a huge part of establishing that. When you read into the Constitution, you could just read it for what it says and try to interpret it conservatively, or you could say, this says this. In order to do this, we need to accomplish all these other things that it doesn't say. So it gives you an opportunity to kind of bend and twist the Constitution in order to get what you want. And that's one thing that Hamilton was great at. It seems a little cynical, but that's a great part of how today we're able to interpret things from the past in a way that implies to, I guess, more relevantly to today, which I guess we got that going for us.
Now for a strong central democracy. If not, then I'll be Socrates throwing verbal rocks at these mediocrities. Hamilton at the Constitutional Convention. I was chosen for the Constitutional Convention. There is a New York junior delegate. Now what I'm gonna say may sound indelicate. Goes and proposes his own form of government. His own plan for a new form of government. He talks for 6 hours. The convention is listless.
Okay, let's talk about Hamilton's new form of government. He talks about a strong democracy earlier in the song. Hamilton embraces the British system, which generally, if you think about it, given the other European powers, it was kind of the more liberal example. So he's got that going for him. But I don't think it worked out very well for him praising the British system too much. People will come back at him and call him a monarchist, and they're not necessarily wrong. What he wants is people with land, people with power. He essentially wants an American aristocracy to make decisions. He's talking about like inheriting positions, president for life. So that's essentially an elected monarch. So he has some ideas that are a little iffy, and later on they are going to haunt him, even when he ends up embracing a completely different system in the Constitution. people are going to remember what he said in this moment.
Right, young man. Yo, who the F is this? Why do you always say what you believe? Why do you always say what you believe? Every proclamation guarantees free ammunition for your enemies.
I guess a good point to make here is that Hamilton, he understood that he wasn't necessarily popular in a lot of cases. He kind of got that, and he even saw it as something to be proud of. The fact that he could be so unpopular, it meant that he wasn't just saying things to appeal to people. He was saying things because he genuinely believed them, and he saw that as kind of a token of pride. He's like, he's thinking like his haters validate how good he is.
Why do you ride like it's going out of style? Ride day and night like it's going out of style. Every day you fight like it's going out of style. Do what you do. Alexander? Aaron Burr, sir. Well, it's the middle of the night. Can we confer, sir? Is this a legal matter? Yes, and it's important to me. What do you need? Burr, you're a better lawyer than me. Okay. I know I talk too much. I'm abrasive. You're incredible in court. You're succinct, persuasive. My client needs a strong defense. You're the solution. Who's your client? The new U.S. Constitution.
Okay, it's fun that this is clearly making a bigger point than an interaction between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. And if we're talking about people who are going to be fighting really hard for the Constitution, Alexander Hamilton is going to reach out to some other people. Obviously, there's the team on the Federalist Papers that I believe they talk about a little bit later in this. The team of him, James Madison, and John Jay. That's the popular trio that we know of. There's also William Dewar, who ended up trying to write some stuff for them, but none of the essays really were what they wanted. And they also thought about getting a guy named Gouverneur Morris, you know, the sexy guy. If you've seen a previous video I did reacting to something about him, he got into sexy situations. But yeah, he was supposed to also do some stuff, but I guess he didn't really want anything to do with it. So him reaching out to other people, it kind of speaks to the larger thing. They were trying to make a big team to make all this happen, I guess, to take some of the work off of the main trio, because like they ended up doing a lot. Even James Madison, when you compare what Hamilton did to what he did, it seems like Hamilton was really carrying the weight, but James Madison, some of his were some of the most important writings in the Federalist Papers, so you can't take credit away from him just because I think he was definitely a quality over quantity case here.
No. Hear me out. No way. A series of essays anonymously published defending the document to the public. No one will read it. I disagree. And if it fails? Burr, that's why we need it. The Constitution's a mess. So it needs amendments? It's full of contradictions. So is independence.
Oh, we're talking about the amendments. Okay, yeah, there was, the Constitution ends up getting passed with kind of the condition that we need to come up with a Bill of Rights. We need some guarantee of rights for people. And Hamilton, well, the Federalists in general, including James Madison at this time, who is going to be on the other side later on, but right now he's on this side, they don't actually want a Bill of Rights. And that's weird because Madison ends up being responsible for the Bill of Rights. The argument is that if you fail to list a right, if you list some rights and not others, it is just implied that you don't have those rights that were omitted, and that there would be more abuse by listing rights because of all the rights that would be left out. So actually, a lot of people were pretty skeptical about creating a Bill of Rights, but we ended up getting it, and James Madison, who opposed it, ended up being so heavily responsible for it.
You have to start somewhere. No way. You're making a mistake. Good night. Hey, what are you waiting for? What do you stall for? What? We won the war. What was it all for? Do you support this Constitution? Of course. Then defend it. And what if you're backing the wrong horse? Burr, we studied and we fought and we killed for the notion of a nation we now get to build. For once in your life, take a stand with pride. I don't understand how you stand to the side.
I really love the stuff going into the second act so much more. This is exciting me to do more of the second act songs, because like the political drama is so much fun, and I think these videos will actually work better for the second act. So I'm super hyped going into next year when I'm going to be wrapping up all the Hamilton stuff.
I'll keep all my plans close to my chest. I'll wait here and see which way the wind will blow. I'm taking my time watching afterbirth of a nation, watching the tension grow.
I am sailing off to London. I am accompanied by someone who always pays. I have found a wealthy husband who will keep me in comfort for all my days. He is not a lot of fun, but there's no one who can match you for turn of phrase. My Alexander, don't forget to run.
I guess this is a pretty good opportunity to talk about John Church and how he fits into this whole dynamic. So Angelica was married to him from kind of the beginning of this story. He's been pretty much written out until here, but he's been in the picture pretty much this entire time. So there was never really any chance for Angelica and Alexander to have gotten together because she was already married. So she is going back to London, where he is from, because he has pretty much settled his financial situation. He came to America fleeing his debts and whatever, but he comes back and he's like, hey, my financial situation is better now. I want to go back. I want to pay my debts. I want to go back to living life like I used to. And she gets to go back with him and live pretty much the ideal life for her. She wants to be this high society lady, and she fits in very well there, and he can fund that lifestyle. And I don't think their relationship was all that bad. It might have been a little rough early on. At first, it's like, oh, we're young and in love and whatever, we're going to elope and get married or whatever. And then they realize, oh, there are some financial issues here. There's some tension in the family because of the way they decide to go about this. There's probably a little bit of trouble there, but they get their financial situation together and head off. However, she clearly has at least a crush on Hamilton, so that's a thing. And that little flirty bit there, I think it's a pretty good example of like how they would behave with one another and how they would write to one another.
Look at where you are. Look at where you started. The fact that you're alive is a miracle. To stay alive, that would be enough. If your wife could share a fraction of your time, if I could grant you peace of mind, would that be enough?
And that's rough, Eliza, because it's not going to be that great. He's always going to be off doing something else, and I've talked about this plenty, and it feels like I'm just going on about it, but it is how it is. Hamilton never really settled in at home for very long without pursuing something else, and it would always be kind of a strain on their relationship, and Hamilton doesn't meet her halfway. She meets him all the way, pretty much. If there's a strain in the relationship, generally she ends up doing everything she can, doubling down in his direction with what he wants to do, although she may be reluctant about it. It is what it is, and she kind of accepts this subservient position as a wife. There are varying degrees, more or less during this time. That's what you had if you were a wife to somebody who was pursuing public life. But there were little degrees of I don't want to say disobedience, but there are plenty of women who would have given him a harder time than she did. She really went out of her way for him.
Alexander joins forces with James Madison and John Jay to write a series of essays defending the new United States Constitution entitled the Federalist Papers. The plan was to write a total of 25 essays, the work divided evenly among the three men. In the end, they wrote 85 essays in the span of 6 months. John Jay got sick after writing 5. James Madison wrote 29. Hamilton wrote the other 51.
So the Federalist Papers hold a very interesting place in American law. They are often used to interpret the Constitution. While in themselves, the Federalist Papers are not legal documents, when you go back and try to figure out what the founders meant, you go to the Federalist Papers. Even though they don't necessarily reflect all of the founders, they reflect a certain segment of the founding fathers that Hamilton happened to be representing here. So the fact that they became what they are in law, it's actually quite interesting how that works. Because they're not legal documents, and they're hella annoying. You don't want to have to read them. That you just kind of have to read them. If you get into political science, law, history, you end up having to read them. They're super dry, super repetitive, and like there are some decent elements to them, but I consider them to be a bit of a slog. It's like the necessary evil to understanding American law. It's unfortunate. I've pointed this out in the past, but some of you have said that I'm wrong for saying that they're not a great read. You must be insane. You must be mad to think that they're a fun read. That's something you would read to have a good old time, because they're not fun.
How do you write like you're running out of time? Write day and night like you're running out of time. Every day you fight like you're running out of time. Like you're running out of time. Are you running out of time? How do you write like tomorrow won't arrive? How do you write like you need it to survive? How do you write every second you're alive? Every second you're alive. Every second you're alive. They're asking me to lead. I'm doing the best I can to get the people that I need. I'm asking you to be my right hand, man. I know.
Okay, that's funny. Washington initially wasn't sure if he wanted to do it. He ends up being pressured by the people around him to step in and basically be appointed president. Of course, there's an election, but who's going to beat Washington in an election? So it's basically a landslide. It's like the landslide. So he decides to establish a concept known as the cabinet, which we know pretty well today, but that wasn't built into the Constitution. That is a George Washington invention, where he surrounds himself with people who will focus on particular elements of the government, and the cabinet has expanded over time, and now he reaches out to some of the best minds in the country. And Washington originally wanted to appoint a guy named Robert Morris, who I've talked about. He ended up being a great financier of the war, and there's so much to his story, but he basically couldn't do it. And he's like, oh, but you know that guy who was basically your assistant for the longest time? Yeah, he knows a thing or two about economics. And Washington's all like, oh, I didn't know he knew about economics. Maybe I'll give him a call. And then that's how Hamilton got the position. That's basically how it went.
It's a lot to ask. Treasury or state behind the world, you know. Sir, do you want me to run the Treasury or State Department? Treasury. Let's go.
Alexander.
And here's him going off again, like I said.
Look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now.
Looks kind of ominous.
They are asking me to leave.
Look around. Isn't this enough? He will never be satisfied. He will never be satisfied.
Oh, there was Jefferson, your boy, your best friend. Is there any? Hope you enjoyed it. That was a lot of fun. That was very well done. I love how much they condensed into this one song. It is one of the longer songs in the musical, but they really covered a whole lot. This could have been a whole nother act. It really could have. There's just so much that goes on in between the adoption of the Constitution and the end of the war. That period is absolutely crucial, and I think totally in itself a worthy area of study. There are historians who could spend their whole time on that and never run out of stuff to look into. It's really wonderful. I'm happy with this one. We got to talk about a lot of stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will be doing more Hamilton. I don't know about this year. Probably at least gonna wait until after Christmas for my next Hamilton video. I've given up more or less. I gave up on doing these in order a long time ago. So who knows which one I'm even gonna do next. I guess I'll just do whichever song I feel like doing. So thank you guys for watching. If there's any videos you want me to check out, put them in the comment section below. It's still December. If you guys want any holiday related videos, leave those in the comment section below. I'm really trying to get into like holiday themed stuff, but I knew I had to give you a Hamilton video before I get too deep into that stuff. I knew you wouldn't want to wait too long. So thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you.